I have a film. So I got the Ellefson Film Company, and we're going to roll out a horror footage. I'm sorry, found footage horror movie called Dwellers that we're going to premiere next week in Charlotte, North Carolina.
Nice.
At Mad Monster HorrorCon. And so they've been kind enough to premiere it for us. And we've now been getting invited to a whole bunch of film festivals this year. So in Chicago, New York, all kinds of stuff.
Can you talk about how you got
Film Company?
Yeah. How'd you get involved in that?
Well, you know how all this stuff
He's
happens.
diversifying his portfolios, ladies and
Just say
gentlemen.
yes. You just say yes. That really is. If there's one takeaway from this whole thing, and you want to go have dinner and just get out of here and cut it short, just say yes.
Hey, welcome to another episode of 2020. My name's Cory Peza. As always, I am here with Siobhán and Benny.
What's up?
Woo! Hey guys.
That was such a bro response.
We have such an amazing Grammy award-winning guest who literally is a man of a gazillion, bajillion, that's his actual number, talents. Cory, would you like to tell us?
As if, like, being the bassist in Megadeth wasn't enough.
Megadeth.
He's such a great storyteller. Like, again, somebody that could just have
He's a
written
writer.
his memoir, verbally, like
Composer,
just through the storytelling
philosopher.
of this episode.
His business card's like 6 pages long. It's ridiculous.
Just listen to the episode. Check it out.
David Ellefson.
Subscribe all your...
Yeah.
Subscribe if you haven't.
Yes. So here it is.
Smash
David
it.
Ellefson, part 1.
Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Benny Goodman, and I'm here with my cohorts as we've trademarked pending. First and foremost, not to be confused with Siobhán Cronin.
Hello.
And then, of course, my compatriot, my friend, my fellow absorber of crazy neurosis, Cory Peza.
I think at least one of those was an accurate description. I don't know.
I like how many descriptors he got.
I'm not gonna say
mad
which.
at me this week?
I'm not gonna say which one though.
I
And
got
then,
a really short intro.
and then our guest is gonna walk on stage because this is like the intro, like we're like fluffing the crowd before like
See if you guys can figure it out.
The Grammy award winning. Can you believe this? The Grammy award winning bass player, crazy philosopher, unbelievable dude, has a coffee company, is a writer, like is fighting for music rights. He has no idea what I'm talking about because he's literally off
hiding behind
over
a
there.
chair.
Yeah. But David Ellefson from the band Megadeth, literally one of my heroes, as well as plays on Lost Symphony, as in lostsymphony.com. And if we've not told you already, 2020-d.com. Please subscribe to everything. Please buy our record, our CD, our vinyl, any of the things, stamps. Like if you want to send Cory stuff, that's fine.
Yeah, send it along. Free things are great. I'll take as much as I can get.
So Siobhán, how's your week been?
Oh, just recording Paganini, so a nightmare.
Oh, we did. I know. We just
There
did
should
that
be
today.
a meme about this where like what you think you sound like and then what you actually sound like when you listen back. Oh my God. It's so hard. I mean, it's just, there's a reason it's really hard.
So
And then people study it for weeks.
I'm going to throw it to David. David, we introduced you so that you could just come in like, we got the whole crowd fluffed, like my mom and like the 3 other people that subscribe. But you obviously are in like one of the coolest metal bands in the history of freaking time. But on top of which, I'd say, are you tired? But you have a coffee company. And then I have not one, but 2 books. One's nonfiction.
Right.
One's fiction. So you're not even writing in the same genre. Like, dude, are you tired yet?
I'm not. I feel good. It's been nice to have the time off. To be honest with you, 2020 shut down. In fact, this year I realized, because just on Friday I got an email from my international agent. I had a European tour I was about ready to announce for Ellefson solo dates. And that was going
and a solo record. Jesus fucking Christ. You have so much stuff. I can't even remember it all, dude. I can only remember 7
And
things
you
at
have a
once.
good memory, Ben, so that's saying a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, and his solo record's amazing. It's a bunch of covers that like we have to get into because they're awesome bands, and he's playing with like some of the craziest players on the planet. But David, please continue.
Yeah,
I'm
no,
sorry for interjecting.
The bursts of energy from Benny Good. It's but I got an email and we had a reschedule of Japan and Australia that we were going to do in November. So October, November, and it's all gone away. So because of COVID, so everything's pushed into 2022, and obviously Megadeth calendar's pretty full. And it literally it's week by week, whatever Live Nation says or whoever the promoters are on it. So my view is this year I'm focusing on that book that you had, the Rockstar Hitman book, and then I have a film, so I got the Ellefson Film Company, and we're going to roll out a found footage horror movie called Dwellers that we're going to premiere next week in Charlotte, North Carolina.
Nice.
At Mad Monster HorrorCon. And so they've been kind enough to premiere it for us next Saturday night, February 20th. And we've now been getting invited to a whole bunch of film festivals this year. So in Chicago, New York, all kinds of stuff.
Can you
So-
talk about how you got
Film Company?
Yeah. How'd you get involved in that?
Well, you know how all this stuff
He's
happens.
diversifying his portfolios, ladies
You
and
just say
gentlemen.
yes. You just say yes. That really is. If there's one takeaway from this whole thing, and you want to go have dinner and just get out of here and cut it short, just say yes, and that's what happens. That's really is.
We've heard that
Valid,
before,
yeah.
so I mean, it's a pattern for sure.
It is, and because and I say that because from '83 when we started Megadeth until 2002 when the group had disbanded for a period, and it was a sudden disbanding. It was kind of foreseen, but it was unexpected, and suddenly like your whole world just crashes. You hit a wall, and it's like, whoa, what am I going to do? How to make a living? This has been my identity. It's kind of the music I play. And I had started to kind of look around. We had a record deal at that time, Megadeth, with Sanctuary, which was put together by Rod Smallwood and the people from the Iron Maiden camp. And we had been offered a little imprint opportunity. So I was actively looking for bands and artists to sign that was the World Needs a Hero tour for Megadeth. So I was looking for people, to sign as I traveled around the world. And it was interesting because our manager
So the world
time,
really did need a hero.
It did.
It wasn't just a clever Dave Mustaine
I couldn't find one, sadly enough. But the truth of it is our manager Larry Mazer, he would always say to me, he'd go, David, be honest with me, is the singer a star? Like that was just it. He's like, forget the riffs, forget how great they look. All these. I mean, look, great songs, of course. But he would always just say, he goes, if the singer's not a star, just pass. Like, just walk away from it because it just isn't going to.
We don't have a singer.
Maybe that's why we're not selling.
Oh, holy shit! I just had an epiphany. That's why this isn't working.
Aren't you glad you did this podcast?
We're learning all the reasons we're not successful.
Exactly. So anyway, a lot of lessons with that, and so here, the Megadeth ends, the train stops, everybody's got to get off, and you get off at that station. And
So it's almost like a train of consequences.
It is of sorts, yes, which led to in my darkest hour for sure.
I like how he passed it along.
Of course. And then the reckoning day came, and so on and on we go. But yeah, and so in that moment, I was, and I got a call from Alice Cooper's camp to tour with them. At the same time, I had been offered a job at Fender, who are right up the street from me, 10 minutes up the road here from me in Scottsdale. And they were, both offering a job, and obviously looked to play with Alice. I'd known Alice. I loved their camp, and I thought I was flattered they would ask me. But my kids were real young. My family was young. I'd spent a lot of time on the road up to this point. A lot, touring with Megadeth. We gave everything to Megadeth. And I just thought, I don't want to be who I am now, 56 years old, and have been on the road and missed my kids growing up and just missed the whole thing, So I kind of held tight on the Fender gig. So Alice moved on, got Chuck Wright from Quiet Riot to play bass. And then Fender, I called him. I said, so what's up? Like, I'm hanging here for this. He said, oh, yeah, we hired someone else. And I went, whoa. And I literally sat there and went, holy shit, I got nothing. Literally everything, two great opportunities, both gone. And our guitar player who was in Megadeth just previously to that, up to that point, was Al Petrelli, who now is had been in
Siobhán played with Al Petrelli.
I played with him in Trans-Siberian Orchestra.
So you know Al. So are you TSO East?
Yeah, I did mostly the East States. I played a couple West shows because they do Florida for some reason, but yeah.
Yep. So you know Al. So he's like, he's with his cigarette and his thick Brooklyn air. So he's like, here's the deal. From this point on, you just say yes to everything. You know, like an old New York gangster. You know what I mean? Just say yes to everything. Yeah, and I love Al. He's really one of my dearest friends. I go see TSO every year when they come through town to just sit down on the floor. They fortunately give me some nice tickets, which I'm thankful for. And I just sit there and I just watch Al because I'm a fan. I not only is he my friend, we were bandmates for several years, but I'm just such a fan of watching him, hearing him. He's so in the music. I mean, Al plays guitar on all the records. So when we hear this stuff on these, Christmas commercials, Honda commercials or whatever they use TSO music, that's Al, So, but Al was a great mentor to me. And because he had been obviously in bands, Alice Cooper and various things. And he had been a side gun, sideman gun for hire kind of guy. So he knew, and he said, he goes, look, this is what you got to do. You just got to start learning to say yes to things. He goes, sometimes you get overbooked, and good problem to have, but it's better than being underbooked, So that's what happened. So yeah, coffee, books, play some bass once in a while. Do some podcasts, you just, you say, yes, that's what you do,
That's amazing. Well, let me ask, so for some of the listeners that may not be familiar with you, and to be honest, I'm a classical music girl, so this is kind of a new world to me. I've read books and read things about you, but I'm interested maybe for people that don't know much about you, if you could walk us through getting into Megadeth, the start of your career.
You want to do walking bass?
Walking bass.
Walking bass. Yeah, just kind of how that all came to be, because I think that's really interesting.
It is. So I grew up on a farm in Minnesota, little town called Jackson, Minnesota. My mother had the musical interest. In fact, I just posted something on Instagram today. Sweden Rock Magazine had done a really wonderful kind of Ellefson family retrospective of my whole career, right? Like,
wow, that's amazing.
It was very cool. And I told them, and I said, my mom went to go see Elvis when she was in nurses training. So this was back in the 50s, 1956, and Elvis had played the Vets Auditorium in Des Moines, where you and I have both probably played, maybe with TSO or the Arts Center next door, right? And so my mom was there, and so she went to the concert. Elvis was very young, and she actually got his scarf, like, when he handed the scarf out. And she always told me, she goes, I want you to make sure you give that to Marty Friedman, after I pass. And
really?
Because Marty's a huge Elvis fan. Yeah.
Oh, okay. I'm like,
wow.
That's the thing you're giving to Marty. You're like, let's give him Elvis's scarf.
I wasn't sure if it was the Elvis thing or the scarf thing. I'm like, is he a
huge
scarf
Elvis
person?
fan? Yeah.
Okay.
No, he's not a scarf guy. Maybe he is. Japan. He lives in Japan. It's cold over there. So
yeah.
But sadly enough, before my mom died, I looked everywhere and I could not find that scarf. And who knows? Maybe Elvis used old lady scarves back then. Maybe they weren't cool Steven Tyler scarves. I don't know what he was using.
I think he uses old lady scars as well, David.
I think he did, right. Hey, he was growing with his fan base, So, and it's funny because she said, next time, he goes, next time when I come back here, this place will be full. And it was, and he came back and played there over the years. But I just posted on Instagram and actually put the picture, and I'm seeing these throngs of young girls with their arms in the air, like screaming for Elvis, and to think my mom is one of those girls.
Yeah.
And
sure.
but she was, she had a great musical ear, sang in the church choir, and so that introduced me to music. So she had the Motown records and Beatles records, so that was where it started. Just liking music. I took they bought a Wurlitzer organ when I was a kid, which was pretty cutting edge. It was like a step up from just a piano cutting, Wurlitzer organ. Had a cassette deck in it. I remember we had Jesus Christ Superstar was the which, as a kid who grew up going to Lutheran church on Sunday, I was like, this Jesus Christ Superstar thing seems a little wrong, right? Like it totally.
Well, you got Deep Purple singing about
exactly.
Except Ian Gillan did it way better than that.
Yeah, he was awesome. So, but that's how I learned to play. I literally took organ lessons from the church from a church organist friend down the literally the dirt road, the gravel road. from where I grew up. But that was where I learned, to read music, bass clef, treble clef. So, right hand, left hand bass, foot pedals, so kind of like a...
That's a lot to start with organ. I mean, that's pretty insane.
At 8 years old, I thought it was a lot.
For sure.
I was like, this
you could have been Ray Manzarek.
Yeah, you're throwing a lot at me here. So, and then I took up tenor sax in 5th grade, just because that's kind of like you're going to be a nerd, a jock, musician. And I didn't really want to be a musician because I was like, I don't really like orchestra music. But I thought the sax was the coolest looking instrument. So I went for that. B flat tenor sax. So I learned to play that. So I became a musician early on, meaning that I can play and understand the language of music. But when it's funny, our pastor, he had a son named Dwight, and he was a long hair guy, and he would drive the school bus every morning because my brother and I had like an hour ride on the school bus growing up.
Wow.
Every morning. Yeah. And he started to listen to WLS AM out of Chicago. And that at the time would be almost like an active rock station, right? Like the hard hitters were, Kiss, BTO, Styx, Sweet is just coming out with Ballroom Blitz, Fox and the Run. Kiss Shout It Out Loud. BTO had, of course, Taking Care of Business, and You Ain't Seen Nothing Yet, and all this stuff. So when I heard that, I went, I want to do that. Like that sounds a lot cooler. So I got a bass. And why a kid from the cornfield in Minnesota would choose a bass? I always say our instruments choose us. We don't choose them, right? They choose us.
Kind of like the wands in Harry Potter, right?
Exactly. They've got your name on them. Bestowed from the heavens.
How did the bass choose you? What was it about it?
What's funny, because the Bachman Turner Overdrive album, Not Fragile, which was the new record at that time, it opens with a bass line. And I didn't know what a bass even sounded like, but it was long, it had fat strings, and it just seemed cool, right? It seemed like the cooler guys played it. Gene Simmons, Tom Hamilton, Bachman, Fred Turner from BTO. It just looked cooler, right?
Did you forget Entwistle?
Yeah, but I wasn't a
Thunderfingers.
I wasn't
not yet. Okay.
No, and in fact, I remember my mom bought me a Hit Parader magazine, and it had Daltrey on the cover. Like swinging the mire, doing some just kick-ass rock god pose. And again, we're done with being a fireman and a policeman. Now we're gonna go be rock stars, right? So for me, the bass wasn't. It was about being a musician, but it was like playing the bass is about being a rock star. I mean, let's not freaking kid ourselves, right?
Like Jaco Pastorius.
Well, he came along many years later.
Okay.
But it wasn't about just being a musician. It was about being a freaking rock star, like we're going to go light shit up. We're going to blow things up. And this is going to, and especially Kiss. I mean, Kiss were my Beatles. Kiss I hear people talk about the impact the Beatles had on them from the Ed Sullivan Show. And that impact that they seem to talk about is the same impact I had seeing Kiss. Kiss played on the Paul Lynde Halloween special when I was a kid, and blew up an amp and looked cool. And, it's just like, come on, that's what we're doing. Right. So that was the pursuit, So, I got and it's funny, on the back of the Kiss records, in particular Alive, it said Kiss used Gibson guitars and Pearl drums because they want the best. And of course I wanted to be like Kiss. So I begged my mom to get a Gibson bass, and lo and behold, like literally the next town over, in a classified ad, some guy was selling a Gibson bass, a Gibson EBO. So we went over, we bought it. It was $150, and the EBO looks kind of like a Gibson SG.
Yeah, I wish they were still $100.
I know, right? And the one that I had, I think, was like a 67 single pickup. It had the violin tuners, so they didn't stick out this way. They actually went back this way.
Look,
sort of threaded through the headstock.
Oh, here we go, Ben's.
That's it. You do. Of course he has one. He's probably got two. Now, that's a EBO or EB3? EBO, right?
He can't hear you.
Ben, put your headphones on.
So that's my bass. I was wondering where it went.
Yeah, man. If anyone wants to buy it on eBay, it's way more expensive. He just gave you the provenance.
I'll tell you what. I'll give you $175. 25 more than I paid.
If you make it 200, I'm in.
So pretty much that bass, right? And a little Fender amp. And I mean, I found a couple of buddies to play and put a band together, and on we went. I mean, that was it. So I've been, and then, at age 12, I'm in bands. Age 12, I got called up into jazz band. The guy who was playing quit, so I got called up into, I think, senior jazz band. I started getting called up to play. I was 12, and 16-year-olds were going, "Hey, that Ellefson kid can play. Let's have him." And I remember the first time I played with this one band, and these guys.
Are you playing double bass?
These two No, I never played double bass. No, never played any uprights. Always been an electric. Never had any interest in uprights. Still don't. Hate the sound of it. Don't like the look of it. It doesn't rock. You can't.
Do you like jazz at all? Are you?
I do, and again, I played it. So I had to learn it. I did. I have studied it over the years. And the truth is, you study jazz, you know all of music, right? You learn how to read.
We've said that so many times on the show. So many
fact.
Different musicians that are insane levels are like, if you want to really torture yourself, jazz. It's like surprise torture music.
Well, and look, the disciplines, obviously, Siobhán, that you've had with classical music. I mean, that's of another level. I mean, just the discipline of it has to be done a certain way. It has to be played with, proper etiquette, and like it's basically like watching Bridgerton on Netflix. Right?
Yeah, sure. Yeah,
it's all of that, right?
Yeah,
but,
it's very controlled. Yeah,
yeah. And it's funny though, because as I got into showbiz literally by age 13. As soon as you walk on a stage and someone's paying you, even if it's $20, you're in showbiz, right?
Oh, absolutely.
You're being paid for
one day.
Yeah, just you're paid. Yeah, one day, Benny, this too.
It'll happen for me. I'll get $20 to leave.
Put a flyer up. Someone will hire you. Trust me, it'll happen.
Yeah. So, I remember when I was growing up, where the first time I was able to play a complete piece with a karaoke machine, my mom was like, "All right, I'm going to put you at one of my events," and that was it. 13 years old.
Not surprising.
True. And I remember 13 getting hired, and I remember going to this one in town. We had an armory, right? It was kind of the event center, and I remember going there with my parents and some friends, and there was like a country and western band playing, right? Both country and western, and they were playing, and
only
and
two types of music, man.
Both types, yeah, the only two types that mattered in the cornfields.
Right,
and I remember this neighbor saying, he was getting kind of drunk, and he leans over and goes, "Hey, just think you could be down there right now for $50 playing country, playing on that stage." And I said, "You know what? I'll play rock and roll for free." I hated country, you know what I mean? And so, because that really was where my heart was at. I mean, my heart was into rock and roll, still is. And
so you followed Kiss up until the free part. Gene Simmons is like, "I would never play rock and roll for free. Why do for free what you can get paid for? I get paid a lot."
Well, there is that. If you can get paid for it, you should get paid for it. Yeah, it's it on and on it goes. And so I was usually the guy in the band that I always started bands. I only joined one band. There was a band out of Iowa in my senior year. My other bands had broken up, so I joined this band out of Iowa, and they'd converted a school bus into like a tour bus, and they played a lot. The dad was like the manager, and he was cracking the whip and, out making them work. But I remember we opened for Johnny Van Zant. We did, some of the bigger bands that were playing the ballrooms and stuff in the area. And ballrooms would hold 1,000 to 2,000 people. So they were pretty big, So I definitely got my chops up before I moved to L.A. I moved to L.A. right after I graduated high school in 1983.
Was it just because you wanted to pursue music, or was there something that, okay.
That was it. It's funny.
You just took the leap.
I did. I was rehearsing in my shed on the farm, like one of the grain buildings that my dad would let us move in and play in. And I was probably 1981, because I think it was like 2 years before I moved to LA. And I remember the thought just hit me out of nowhere. It's like, I got to get to LA. And I remember I went up into the house. I told my parents, I'm changing my name. I'm dyeing my hair blonde. I'm getting an earring, and I'm moving to LA tomorrow. One of those. And they're like,
that's amazing to have such a vision. Like, you're so sure of that. That's incredible.
And I just followed it for the next 2 years, and my parents, look, I was obviously serious about playing, and they helped me. They gave me the family van. They dedicated a building for my band could rehearse. We, my dad helped me buy a PA, head of lights. When I got to LA, and I was like, it's fucking girl into the whiskey. You got sound and lights and everything here. You're like, you guys are spoiled, man. I mean, back where in the Midwest, even the big bands. In fact, there was a band that Yanni played in called Chameleon before he became Yanni. And he was the keyboard player. And
he was always Yanni.
They were always Yanni. He was always.
They just didn't know it yet, man.
Yep. And but it was like a kind of a Bon Jovi sounding band. I mean, literally. Bon Jovi kind of sounding band, kind of teeny bopper, but a rock band. They're very popular all through the kind of 4 or 5 states in the Midwest. They put records out. They toured. They did the whole thing. And I remember opening for them a lot. And they had the whole thing. I mean, a big sound system, lighting. In fact, it's funny. His drummer, Charlie Adams, who then went on to play with Yanni when Yanni went solo, he had the spinning drum kit that Tommy Lee had.
Really?
And like 5 years before, 3-4 years before Tommy did it. Yeah. And I heard that Tommy's tech knew that tech. And that's where the whole idea came in, to get the spinning drum kit. And so when I remember going down to see Girls, I think Whitesnake was supporting him, and they played Long Beach Arena. So this is 86 or something like that, 86, 87. And seeing the spinning drum kit, and went, hey, ripped that off from Yanni's band, So
that's kind of funny to think, though, that you actually that Motley Crue ripped off Yanni. And then you find out like Michael Bolton was like also like ghostwriting Kiss songs. You're like, what?
Come on,
what is going on with my life?
What? I'm reading a great book right now called "They Just Seem a Little Weird." I know Eddie Trunk had just had the author, Doug Boyd, I think is his name, had just had the guy, or Broad, maybe is his name, and it's a great book. It's about how Kiss, Aerosmith, Stars, and Cheap Trick basically all were interconnected. And this guy, I mean, he did a great job writing this book. Just the history, because it's that kind of stuff. Sean Delaney, who was Bill Aucoin's, right-hand man. And
I also love that you're a defender of the faith, because it's so important for people to understand where you come from. And one of the things that was so illuminating when you came and played with Lost Symphony was how learned you are with music, but also like you stuff. Like you talk to a guy like Billy Gibbons, that guy will tell you everything about every blues record, every guitar player, every guitar he's ever played, and you're one of those guys. You know every bass you've played, you know every place you've been, you chronologically can cycle through it, and you know all the people that got you there, and it's amazing to think that like, yeah, dude, Motley Crue ripped off Yanni.
I saw it. I was there. Hey, so to add to this story, so here's a funny thing. It wasn't actually funny when it went down, but so when I met Dave, right? So Megadeth is a band. So I moved to LA literally 5 days after graduate school, me and 3 other buddies, right? So we moved to LA, we moved into this apartment, 1736 North Sycamore. And that whole street and that whole area were kids just like me who were going to go to MI, right? The Musicians Institute. And they had a lot of ads and guitar player. And so I'd always see that. And that's honestly how I sold my parents on me moving to LA is, hey, there's a school out there and I'll go to school. And I was going to go. I mean, my hope was that would happen. What is actually happened, which is I'll get there.
But then you got high.
No, I wasn't even getting high. I mean, that was there too, but
that's why I didn't go.
Yeah, that was just circulating in the background, but because I was not like a stoner druggy kid, I fell into it, and then I had to get sober and get out of it, which I did in 1990. But that wasn't my, I didn't play music so I could get laid. I didn't play so I could be popular. I didn't do it for any of those reasons.
Well, that's why you're a bass player. Obviously, you had rationalized this at some point.
The glue guy, right? Yeah. So I move out there to this apartment, and I meet Dave, Mustaine, who lived up above me, and I didn't know who he was. I'd never heard of Metallica, and so we meet him over a case of beer, and he's a great storyteller, and he's telling these stories about Metallica. We're like, whoever that is, and they had just gone to the East Coast and signed their deal with Megaforce, and that was when he got let go from the band. So little hot, little spicy, little hot over the whole deal. But he picked up his guitar and he started playing, and was like, whoa, like that was next level stuff. Like I'd never heard anything like that, I mean, it was beyond Iron Maiden. It was beyond anything. It was a vision, when you meet you, and we've all worked with them, right? The people, Paul O'Neill, you've worked with him, of course, we've all worked with people who have a vision. They see something that we just don't even see. Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so we're lucky that we get to work with these people in our careers. And Dave is one of those guys. And, so he was playing, and I was just like, me and my friend Greg, we go back downstairs to our apartment that night, and Greg's like, "Dude, we got to play with that guy." I said, "I know that guy. He's awesome. He's scary, but he's awesome. he's the real deal. And I realized pretty quickly, just walking down Hollywood Boulevard, everybody either looked like Vince Neil or David Lee Roth, because part of what hit me 2 years prior to moving there was Van Halen was now very popular. And this, as the next year or so would go on, Ozzy was getting his musicians from there, and that's how we learned about Quiet Riot with Randy Rhoads and Rudy Sarzo. Then we started to learn, once Jakey Lee got in Ozzy's band, now we heard about Rat and Mickey Rat, and so we started hearing about it. And then, once Randy even before, Jake, Brad Gillis was in the band, so we heard about this band called Night Ranger. So, suddenly the West Coast was the spot, and it seemed like everybody was going there to get, these bands were forming, this new scene was happening. And I remember Motley was in Hustler magazine. I remember my drummer Brad like a Hustler, dude, check out this band, Motley Crue, and
sounds
so
very on brand.
Yeah. And so it just seemed go West, get out there. And so when I got there, obviously that was happening. I mean, Quiet Riot, Mental Health is number one at MTV. The US Festival had just happened. So Judas Priest, Ozzy, Van Halen had headlined it. And it was big stuff, So I get there and then I meet Dave, and he's already way past what's happening now, which again, I've always admired that about him, that he is a guy who is not in the moment, not trying to write what's happening now. He's always several steps way out in front of everybody else. So my friend Dave was actually teaching this kid, Matt Kisselstein, how to play bass. He was a nice kid from Beverly Hills, but he's kind of teaching him how to play bass, teaching him how to play these songs that Dave was writing at the time. And so Greg kind of wormed his way in first as the second guitar player, and then once he got in, and he goes, "Listen, man, you got to ditch Matt, man. You got to get Ellefson here. This guy knows how to play bass." So Greg got me in, and then we started rehearsing. We did a few rehearsals, and then we came back to the apartment. The day came like, "Hey, we need a name." And Dave was kind of kicking around this name, Fallen Angel, which didn't really stick with anybody. And I remember Greg goes, "I think we should call the band Megadeth." Because Dave had a song that he'd written called Megadeth. It was the first song he wrote when he was coming home from Metallica. They sent him home on a Greyhound bus to add insult to injury. So he's coming home and he finds this handbill from Senator Alan Cranston from California, who was talking about the arsenals of Megadeth can't be rid, right? Meaning we've built up this nuclear armament now, disarmament here on the planet that we can't even get rid of it. Kind of like Tesla batteries, right? We can't get rid of the Tesla batteries. What are we going to do with them, right? There's poison to the earth. So
you're just a modern day cowboy, dude.
Exactly. So the Megadeth today is the Tesla battery, right? We just can't get rid of them. It's going to poison the earth forever. So
no, that's CC DeVille, dude.
CC DeVille.
You said poison.
No, boing.
I'm confused. I'm so confused.
We're all confused now.
So we're talking about vision. That's how Benny's brain works. He's like 4 steps out here.
He's just on a different universe. Yeah. He's not even with us.
Yeah.
Shannon Larkin's on my wavelength.
You're equally on some other wavelength. I don't know.
Reel him in. But so, that's the story, So we meet, then we start playing. We call the band Megadeth, and here we are.
I have a question, kind of the ellipsis between how it happened and now here we are. Right. And I'm always curious as far as bands, especially at your level, how long was it before your first show and when the traction started to be noticeable as far as, gaining fans? Because I know my experience in local music scenes and building bands, it seems like just this mystical thing to actually have that traction go all the way to, and rocket ship up. So what was that like at that period in time?
Unless you're star set, then you literally rocket ship up.
Yes.
There was time in between that too. But anyway, go on. Sorry.
Well, good question. And in my case, I had that experience in Minnesota, trying to just, how do you kickstart this thing and just get some spark turned to a flame, turn into an inferno. And it just never happened. And that's why I just knew, look, I got to get to LA. That's where the action's at. So when I met Dave, look, Dave was definitely a rock star. I mean, he just had the poise and confidence of such. He was definitely famous in Metallica. The people on the scene, like we'd go out to the Troubadour, we'd go out to see a show, and people were, oh my God, Dave Mustaine's here. You know, like he is an attractive character, you know, charismatic guy, right? And so right out of the gate, this thing didn't start here, it started here. You know what I mean? And then went up from there. So the beauty of that is it's not like I went to LA and then had to start, you know, hanging flyers on the telephone pole in Laurel Canyon and try to get people to, you know, pay to play to come and see us at the Whiskey. In fact, that's one of the first things Dave said. He goes, we're not playing any clubs in LA. We're going to debut the band up in San Francisco. Because that's where he had relocated with Metallica up to San Francisco. And the scene up there was, while in LA it was Quiet Riot and Rat and Motley Crue and, you know, the kind of the Sunset Strip thing. And of course, these bands had all now, you know, they were on MTV, they were signed, they were taking off. Well on their way by 83. But San Francisco had a whole other scene going on, which was very much the thrash, what we now think of as thrash. You know, so Metallica was a huge component of that, big time. And Dave was a star. I mean, he was essentially the front man of Metallica. James would sing, but Dave did all the talking in between the songs. Like, he was a well-loved part of Metallica. And so he knew where the well was, you know? So when we launched the band so again, we formed in June of 83. We played our first show in February of 84, right? So 7 months later. Kerry King from Slayer joined us on guitar because he was kind of, he didn't know if he was going to continue with Slayer. I could tell he was kind of on the fence about it because Slayer kind of had some interest, but it hadn't. Again, it was kind of the same thing. They were wearing makeup. They were kind of half Motley Crue and Wasp, not Scorpions anymore, but kind of trying to figure it out.
Straddling the fence.
And Kerry had seen Dave play with Metallica at the Whiskey opening for Saxon a few months earlier. And Kerry told me, he goes, dude, that Dave changed my life, man. That seeing him play, that changed everything about how I play guitar, how I think about music. So he was a good fit. I mean, he was a great rhythm guitar player, played some solos. Dave did most of the soloing, but so Kerry was really, you know, astute with it. We go to the Bay Area. He sees what's going on up there and goes, holy shit, like, this is the deal, you know? And I remember we did an in-store. We went to the Record Vault right there in San Francisco to do an in-store. And then kids came up and go, dude, Slayer, when's Slayer do? And so you could see the eyeballs popped open like, yeah, don't quit your day job quite yet. You know what I mean? Like, so he went back down to when we played the shows off the hook. I mean, and again, like you say, I mean, packed 500, 800 seat, you know, venues packed. I mean, so it started, you know, what would take bands 3-4 years to pack these places, we'd pack day one, you know? So I'm very blessed. You know, I kind of look at all that work I did in Minnesota as just the kind of the, you know, the growing up grounds, get your chops together. Cause when you hit LA, it's welcome to the big time, kid.
Do you think if you didn't have that foundation and kind of the struggle of having to figure everything out, you would be able to appreciate and manage what you had once you were at that level?
Yeah, I mean, you know, fortunately, my dad had what they would call a tin ear, meaning no ear for music at all, right? And as my dad, of course, he understood business. The Ellefson men were educated businessmen, you know, so he tried to understand sort of the business of it. And, you know, he'd say things like, you know, don't ever sign a contract without having a lawyer look at it. What's the first thing you do? Go sign a contract without having a lawyer.
Right, yeah, sure.
You know, what does my dad know? You know, and you know, so he was, you know, that was his sort of way to try to understand what I was doing, you know, because he knew I took it seriously. He saw me. I mean, he's growing up. He saw I was serious. This wasn't just, hey, I'm going off to LA to smoke dope and find chicks and dude playing a band, bro. You know, I was not that guy at all, and still never have been, you know? So, you know, so I think, you know, it's, you know, I think a lot of it was growing up in the clubs and, you know, again, I remember going up to, you know, I was the guy who always talked to the booking agents, you know, to handle the contracts. I'd put the promo kits together. Like, you know, I'd go out to the band guys. Hey, I just got on the phone with, you know, GMA up in Minneapolis, and we're going to go out, audition for them so we can get more gigs, but we need a promo kit. Like, we got to get someone to take the photo. You know what I mean? So I was kind of the organizational guy, you know, with
you guys didn't have iPhones?
Before iPhones, believe it or not. There was a time. before iPhone.
I'm trying to picture
It's
this.
amazing. Yeah, it's got,
as a bass player who actually knows music and handles all the grunt work and like the busy work. You must have been the most in-demand band member in the country.
And I figured the other thing was sing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I didn't put that together. Like I always say, I would always shoot for the Michael Anthony harmony. You know, I loved Michael Anthony, and I loved that he was
ambitious.
Yeah, it's in fact when we wrote Peace Sells, you know, at the very end of the song, it vamps out the chorus, Peace Sells, but who's buying? I was like, okay, we've done it 4 times. Something's got to change. Because, you know, in music, when you're composing after about 4 bars or 4 sections, something's got to change. Either add, take away, something. So I just walked up to the mic and was like, Peace sells, but who's buying? You know, I just go for the third, you know, and just add that little extra, you know, thing in there. So, you know, that as much as I wasn't going to be the lead singer, which is kind of funny how that happened. You know, we were auditioning singers because originally Megadeth was going to be a 5-piece, right? We were thinking 2 guitars, bass, drums. Dave wasn't going to sing. And we had auditioned singers, and they'd flake out, and it was very poserish in LA. You know what I mean? Just again, people coming in with their scarves. Yeah. No disrespect to Elvis.
I'm not sure much has changed.
His scarves. And I remember it was New Year's Eve where we rehearsed kind of downtown LA. There was like a guy named Curly Joe, and he had a rehearsal place, and he was a musician. So we're there. Freaking guy, the singer flakes out. So Dave just takes the piece of paper of lyrics, pins it to the frickin' wall or to the mic stand, and we take it from the top of the tune, and just out of frustration, he sings the song. I think it was like Chosen Ones or something, one of the early songs that we had, and he sings it and plays it and almost falls over, you know, because when you don't know how to sing and you're screaming and yelling and your face turns red, you know, right?
I can imagine.
And kind of like nitrous.
And it totally. And I said, dude, that was freaking awesome. He goes, what? Really? And I said, yeah, man, it was freaking great. And I said, look, you're writing the lyrics. Like, no one's going to be in the song and get these lyrics more than you. I mean, you may as well do it. And that night changed the course of everything. And then he started singing. You know, admittedly, he was like, look, you know, that's not singing isn't my thing, you know, but he's what I really learned.
Killing is his business.
Killing is his business. But what I learned from that night is that being a singer, you know, there's kind of 2 types. One, obviously, trained, you know, professional singers is
like David Lee Roth,
awesome craft, yeah, or Steven Tyler. But these guys, like Steven Tyler, like David Lee Roth, they bring a charisma that, you know, as soon as you hear them, like, you know who it is, right? And they deliver their words like nobody else can. You know, and you know the Van Halen story. You know, Eddie was the singer, and it was Alex who convinced him to get David Lee Roth in the band. Partly because they were renting the PA from Roth, and if they got him in the band, then they could cut the $50 rental fee. Well,
didn't Ted Templeman try to get? Hold on, but didn't Ted Templeman try to get Sammy Hagar all the way back from Montrose, the Montrose years? But then they're like, the chemistry's too good. We can't get a real singer like Sammy.
You know, it's funny. I'm reading the Ted Templeman book now, so I will cross-check that fact. And you're probably right. It probably was.
Which is why Michael McDonald worked on 1984, right?
What's that?
Well, I said that's why Michael McDonald worked on 1984, because he was doing the Doobies.
I did not know this story.
Ted Templeman. It's the Doobie Brothers and Van Halen.
It's spoiler alert in that book you're reading.
Oh, right? Spoiler alert.
I've never read the book. I just know about Ted Templeman because I'm a loser.
I think you're the king of buying books.
He's just
and not
like
necessarily
making
reading
shit
them.
up.
I'm not. I swear to God.
He's like, oh, let me give you a book tour on my Instagram. It's like, okay, Ben, how many have you read?
I know. I'm gonna go. Yeah, exactly. This guy's a poser. He doesn't even have books. He doesn't even own books. In fact, that one book I sent him.
It's true.
He did buy it though.
I did know. I support. No, and actually, I encourage everybody, like, because this is a really hard time for everybody in the entertainment industry. A lot of people have had to pivot, as if David hasn't pivoted in 1,000 ways anyway.
Stop sounding so corporate.
I've done a 360.
But I'm telling you, it's a 180. Because otherwise we'd be talking about the same thing. But the fact that, you know, I want to support you, and I think everyone should go support you and everybody else that they believe in this industry, because it's really hard right now.
It's also hard to write a book.
Yeah,
I mean, a lot of people say they'll do it and then don't. So, yeah, that's amazing that you did that. Too.
Yeah, thank you. I know I've written 5 of them, and it's funny that that one there that you hold, the Rockstar Hitman. I wrote it. I was in São Paulo, Brazil, back in 2019, December 2019, so just over a year ago. And a friend of mine called me, and he said, he goes, "Where are you?" And I said, "I'm down in São Paulo. I'm on a little solo tour." And he laughed. He goes, "You know, we all think you're this rock star," but he goes, "I'm tending to think you work for the CIA and you're like doing hit work on the side." And I go, "Dude, that's a freaking great idea to write a book about." So I said, "Can I use that?" He goes, "No problem." That's why I had to thank him in the book, you know. I wanted to thank him because it was a great idea, and he's a good friend of mine. And so I took that idea, and I literally, I mean, that day I just opened the laptop and just started just vomiting ideas out into the paper, you know, to the laptop. And I wrote, and I hit my friend Drew Fortier, and I said, "Man, I got this idea for a book." I said, "You've got a demented, sick, twisted mind, and can you jump in for some killing sprees and help me kind of pepper the book out, you know?" And because being the bass player, I'm good with, again, organizational. Yeah. I developed the characters, I developed sort of the storyline, and then, you know, I brought Drew in, and he would just do these random, radical turns in the book. I go, "Man, this is a freaking page turner, man. We got something here."
You know what I love about it?
But we started.
Well, I was going to say, because if you read the back of it, it says The Sledge Chronicles. Rockstar
This is his first time
Hitman.
reading it, by the way.
No, it's not. Is the first chapter in the action-packed saga of Sledge. Now, I love that because I appreciate the marketing technique because it implies that there are more chapters. We did the same thing with Lost Symphony.
And
we started with chapter 1. There's more.
Well, it's exactly how we wrote it. Is that this is going to be a series of books, right? And since he's a musician, and I want to give the story away, but obviously Rockstar Hitman, it kind of tells itself. But so in the story, he's going to be traveling around, right? So these escapades can continue as his tour carries on, as his career goes on. So book 2 is almost done, actually, and we're going to probably timeline that for this year to put that out. And the other thing that was fun about it is, you know, I wrote it. I thought, okay, you know, do I write it? You know, like if you read a Grisham or a Jack Reacher book, or, you know, Balducci, some of these guys, they usually write it as sort of a third person telling the story, and then there's quotes of the characters. As I was writing this one, I thought, you know, because he's you know, kind of this you know, musician kid, you know, kid from the Midwest, goes to California. So there's a little bit of some autobiographical storyline, none of the characters or none of the activities, but some of the, you know, origins of it. And so I liked writing it from his point of view, from the character. So it's basically, I realized it's a fictional autobiography because he's telling the story. And it's different to sort of develop the emotion, and sometimes the humor. There was a way to kind of write some humor into it, that because it's him telling the story, and he can, you know, by being autobiographical in its narrative, he can explain some of, like, "Oh shit, I killed the wrong guy. Oh my God, what am I gonna do?" You know,
it's like a historical fiction noir.
Yeah, well, it's like you, Benny. We can hear you talk. You can hear your thoughts outside your head. You know,
that's because he says all of them without restraint.
Yeah, that's where we go, Benny. Like it came out loud. Like you really did say that.
As someone who has such a strong background in music and also in many other areas, and especially writing, are there any parallels in producing music versus authoring a book?
Good question. They're very similar. At least I think so. You know, when you, excuse me, you know, we all write different, but usually it's, you know, we sit down at a piano or we just pick up a guitar, or, you know, but just the process starts kind of unassumingly. Even when you're in these sort of writing sessions, which I don't like. I was like, you know, we're going to take this next month and write the next album. It's like, it's just, you know, squeezing and sometimes, you know, Megadeth is a band that usually when there's a deadline, we work better. You know what I mean? It's like, this has to come out because we're going on tour. There's you know, we've got stuff. I find sometimes that pressure cooker does work well in Megadeth. A lot of other situations, it doesn't. And I've actually been in a writing season this last month, actually, where, again, piano, guitar. I'm riding my bike outside and suddenly I pick up my phone and go, oh my God, I got to like voice memo this lyric. And I've literally written 2 songs just riding my bike, doing like around the block, right? I come home, I sit on my laptop and I type it out. I'm like, oh my God, that's freaking just fell out of the sky, And I think that's the biggest thing with creation is just being able to capture it whenever it happens. I'll sit here and just flip my iPhone around. I'll be playing something. Go, oh my God, where's my phone? And grab the phone and just flip, reverse the thing and just play the riff so I can remember the note. And then just put it away, go have dinner, whatever, come back the day or 2 and just listen to it and go, I got, and then develop it from there. And then I try not to get too married to the initial ideas. I kind of let that just sort of flow. And then I get, either sit down here, I go into a studio here in town and I'll hey, let's whip up a drum pattern and let me rock this riff down, and then, develop it from there. So, similar to authoring a book, just like, again, São Paulo, oh my God, freaking rock star, he's freaking killing people, awesome, and just kind of start, there I was in São Paulo, whatever. I didn't use São Paulo in this case, but, kind of just, I forgot even where it started. I remember I kind of started a little ways into it, and then I went, okay, let me go back to this main character, and then, and just started, man, it just, when it comes to you, it comes to you, know? I mean, we know we're creative types. So, to me, it's more about just when the floodgate opens, just frickin' let it all out.
And then so that's like kind of getting the ideas out, which does seem very similar, especially if you're a lyricist, writing's writing from that standpoint. But as far as like, say, I guess, production, like where you're producing an album, which is, maybe going back over the initial drafts, things like that, do you find, are there similar like aspects that you enjoy about both, fine tuning things or, letting someone like an outsider, like a producer or editor in one case, like give you notes and then refining things like that?
Yeah. It's to that question, sometimes people ask, when you write, are you thinking about the pentatonic scale or the Dorian mode or da-da-da-da? And I say, listen, it's great to understand the language of music just because you can speak it. Like if you're going to live in Spain, it's good if you can speak Spanish, not Spanglish, just because it's easier to communicate. And I remember the Beatles were talking about that when they were working with different orchestra musicians in India and all these things. They realized if we learn the language of music, it'll just make it easier. I'm a big proponent of that. So, but when I write, I just kind of throw all that out. Just forget any of this. Move fingers to where notes sound great and chords are kind of pleasing, and just run with that. Then sometimes you're sitting down and you're going, okay, now I got to expand this bridge, or I need to work this piece here, or maybe you're putting a vocal over it and go, okay, what notes are legal here? And which ones aren't legal. And that's
jazz, baby, whatever you want.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Well, what do they say? What for one mistake is a mistake. The second time you make the mistake, it's jazz.
Basically.
So, but so there's a time and a place for, maybe theory, if you will, and these kind of things like or let's let me start the lick on sort of the second tone, which would be the Dorian, and that kind of things to just maybe flavor the riff or the lick.
Yeah.
And that's when it's nice to have that availability of the knowledge to being able to kind of move around. I find it's better when you get more into the details of the production. I was called in to play on a record, some guys that write in LA with a bunch of pop people. And it was a Colombian female artist, or actually they're launching it this weekend over Valentine's Day rather. The other
might as well be the same thing.
Yeah.
It's synonymous.
Yeah, right. Christmas, whatever. And because it's very much Justin Bieber, Ariana Grande. It's like that kind of music. So it's heavy, bass, chords, very repetitive. You're really getting everything out of the way for the female vocal to carve through. And so initially it was like, look, just kind of play, G, F, D, just kind of play that. And just sort of humanize the keyboard pad. And then the writer, he said to me, and he's one of the producers as well. He goes, tell you what, now just go for it, man. Just play some stuff. And it was nice to, to be able to work from that perspective, and go, okay, what's my key? Okay, F major, and what are the notes that are, and be able to kind of understand, to be able to move around, because right there on the moment, it's like, okay, pull some licks out of the quiver and start firing some arrows, And so it was nice to know what notes were legal, what really worked, in that kind of a setting. So, so that's probably a more recent one. And producing is weird. Dave and I used to always have a saying. I think someone told it to us back in the early 80s, they said, nothing's final until it's vinyl. Meaning until it's going to come out and you're ready to press it, and make that master, because back in the day we used to go in when we were mastering and make the actual lacquer at the mastering plant, that they would then take that lacquer, and that is the piece from which all the vinyl records were pressed from. So, until that thing was made and it was shipped off to the to the pressing plant for the record company, like anything can change. Every note, the mix, you could always go, let's tweak that mix one last time, and of course now today we've got all this luxury of automation, which is beautiful. Because I remember doing mixes, as we probably all have, before we could afford computer stuff, all hands on deck, you're like 14, 24 channels, 36 inputs, and you got people writing faders and, doing all kinds of stuff, to try to, there's nothing on this track until after the second chorus. And then that's when the shaker comes in. So make sure you push it up, but don't push it up too soon, because there's a shredding guitar solo up until that point, So, you're just finding space and tracks back in, when you're working on analog 24 track tape. So, which, I think that's how Beatles records were made, right? They'd record 4, they'd bounce them down, record 3 more, bounce them down, record 2 more. Yeah.
I think we definitely take for granted the access we have to the technology.
Ringo got the left ear.
There's a great video that I saw. I know, these random things.
No, Siobhán doesn't know this. Siobhán, if you listen to the Beatles, they only had 4 freaking tracks. So Sir George Martin decided, I'm going to put Ringo out the left ear, not Pete Best, not to be confused. Okay, Ringo Starr came out the left ear. So if you listen to some of those old recordings, they're a little disconcerting for people that are used to like normal mixes, which is also why they re-released the Beatles in mono.
Okay, interesting. I'll have to listen for that now. I had like 5 questions that just escaped me because of that story. So
I know.
Thanks for that.
This random interjection of Ringo just threw me way off my game here.
No, but I did want to ask you before you move on. When it comes to writing, has getting ideas been something that has always happened naturally to you? Like you've said that you have to just capture them. But, as someone from classical music, I struggle with that a lot because I get so enmeshed in the rules, where it's like must play in this scale.
Diatonically.
Pattern, yeah, and it's like I get so caught up in the rules when it comes to writing because my whole life has been just playing other people's music, right?
Right.
So it's interesting to me how people develop that creative voice and whether it comes naturally or if it's something that can get better over time.
Well, it's it's funny. Excuse me. We had a drummer, Gar Samuelson, and I remember we were going over to his house one night after rehearsal or something, and his brother Stuart is a great guitar player, and I asked him too. I said, how do you I was kind of trying to find my way with creating. And again, the Megadeth stuff, Dave was essentially the architect of the sound and what it was, and it took me a couple records before I started, collaborating and kind of finding my voice inside of that. So I asked Stu, I said, so how do you create? How does this work? And again, as a kid, I'd written, I picked up the guitar. I used to write on guitar all the time. So I would just sit down, and just compose, and then I'd show them to the band guys and we'd go play them on stage. And, so I already knew the process, but I was confused on how to do it, I guess maybe in this new setting of this Megadeth setting. And I remember Stuart said to me, he goes, I think the idea is to just start the creative process and just always keep it going. Like, just, again, keep the floodgate open, just always let it go. Sometimes you'll hit spots where it doesn't come, and don't worry about it. But I think if we're always creating and we're always thinking about creating, it just sort of comes. And I've gone through the same thing. I'll go through seasons. I just went through a 3-week period where I just wrote almost an album of material, lyrics, just stuff. And like today, I got asked to work on some lyric stuff. And so it came to me very easy. I was very in the mode, tweaking words, developing a melody, knowing, okay, these words don't sing well. There's clutter in the too many syllables. And how do I streamline this thought with maybe fewer words to say the same thing? And because that becomes a lot of it with singing, is when you sing for a while, these words, they look good on a page and it might work good in a book, but it's a nightmare to
Can I tell you a secret?
Yeah, doing it in practice for sure.
Iambic pentameter.
More useless information.
Yeah. It makes it so much easier to sing.
Okay, you must explain this.
You don't know iambic pentameter? It's what it is. Siobhán, you probably could tell me the exact amount of syllables. It's a certain writing pattern so that you could basically follow, just like a haiku is 5, 7, 5.
Shakespeare?
I feel like Shakespeare wasn't iambic.
Look, I don't know about that, but I know this. Let's use these guys.
AC/DC.
You shook me all night long. Can you sing that or not?
Yeah.
Can a stadium of people sing that? How about shout at the devil? Okay, let's run with that. Let's see, does that work?
So,
is that iambic pentameter?
Iambic pentameter is
No,
literally
that's just
named.
metal, David.
It's literally
That's just
named
metal.
after Shakespeare's writing style. That's
so basically
yeah.
not singable. So that was
exactly.
not helpful.
Yeah. Well, in other words, what would Bon Scott do? What would Nikki Sixx write?
He would drink. That's what Bon Scott would do about
We're
it.
talking rock and roll. Let's dumb this down to the lowest common denominator.
Ben just really wanted to use a multi-syllable
Because that's
word.
really where the most fun is. It's like, being,
Always
again,
laughing.
we've all done it. We're all musicians and fairly accomplished on this little chat here. So, we like being the snob in the room and, knowing slightly more, or singing more, or playing a little more. And that's fun until none of your friends want to play with you anymore. You know what I mean?
Welcome to classical music. It's like nobody even wants to come to concerts. It's,
it's funny. I think it was on the cover. Ron Carter has that quote on the cover of the Current Bass Player magazine with Jason Momoa on the cover. He said that jazz is serious business, and he's right. It is serious business, which is
good.
Why well, maybe not though. Because I always say, look at AC/DC. Play fewer notes, make more money, play to more people.
And do the same record 6 times.
100%. I'm friends with a lot of jazz musicians, and it's amazing the amount that the set times they have to play, how much they have to learn, what they have to write, and it's for like way less money than anything else. It's
for $150
wild.
a night,
for a 4-hour set at a club with 5 people listening.
Or write 3 chords and make $150,000.
Right.
So that's where, scale of economy.
Yep.
Less notes, more money. And again, it's not about the money, but it is about the fun factor. You know what I mean? When you go to the keg party.
Well, quality of life too. I mean, it's like if you're going to slave over stuff so hard and it's like you can't even sustain it and you start to resent it. Yeah, I mean, there is a balance. It's worth talking about.
Yeah, and we have a lot to talk about.
Wasn't it actually about the money?
I prolonged this episode. That was
absolutely.
My fault.
I think,
honey, it's about the money.
Exactly. But this
money, honey, isn't it? That's another AC/DC lyric. See,
that's what I was saying. You're talking about AC/DC
from Shakespeare. Something that rhymed in iambic pentameter.
We're up at the end of this first hour here. So
that's onomatopoeia, by the way. No, I'm just kidding.
I think I'm going to change my shirt for the next one.
He's going to leave and never come back.
Never come back. Ladies and gentlemen, you've been 2020. Stick around later this week for David Ellefson Part 2. He's got so much stuff we don't have time for it. Holy crap.
And don't forget to subscribe. See you at Part 2.
It's,
music fluid.
I ran Aerosmith's publishing at one point, and I gave Steven Tyler his first royalty check.
Wow.
And,
no big deal. No big deal.
I don't think he remembers it. I used to introduce
I don't think he remembers 1982 to 1989 day.
It's every time I would see him, he'd come into the office. I was working at his management company at the time, and he would come into the office and I would introduce myself to him. every time.
Oh my gosh! Wow.
And sometimes
He's one of those guys.
And sometimes he would say, "Dan, why are you reintroducing yourself?" And it's like, but sometimes he didn't. You know? So.